So it's 7 o'clock, it's a Thursday evening, must be time for an RDA webinar. My name's Caroline Ward and I'm Head of Communication and Insight for RDA UK. We're also joined this evening by what I think you can see at the rear end of my cat, Mrs. Brown, so I'm really hoping that we don't see any more of her during this evening. More officially, I'm delighted to be joined by RDA UK Trustee with responsibility for participants, Emma Wells. Good evening, Emma.
Good evening, everybody.
And by Paula Thomas, who is a rider and volunteer at Penniwells RDA in Greater London. So thank you both very much for joining us this evening. So this evening for our 30 minutes, we're going to be looking at participant experience and encouraging groups to think more about how they can engage participants more in all areas of RDA life, and also how as a national organisation we can be doing that more too. This is an area which Emma and I are very passionate about, and during our discussions and reaching out to groups, we have found Paula to also be someone who's very passionate on this subject, and I'm sure among our participants she is by no means alone. Our discussion tonight is part of a wider project which Emma and I are spearheading, all about participant engagement. There's a lot of activity going on at the moment to try and ensure that we are consulting with and getting feedback from more participants over time. And there will be certainly more of that going on as RDA launches its new strategy at the end of this month. But without further ado, because I do have a tendency to go on, I am going to hand over to Emma, who really will be hosting the discussion topic with Paula this evening. So over to you, Emma. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Caroline, and thank you, everybody. Okay, so Paula, I'd like you just to introduce yourself. All I'll say about you is that this is Paula, and Paula is a rider at Penniwells. So Paula, tell us all a little bit about yourself and RDA.
Yeah, sure. So hi, good evening. I've been with Penniwells for about 4 years. They're not my first RDA group, but certainly my first RDA group as an adult. I'm a rider with them and I'm registered blind. I came out away from riding for about 20 years, just moved from the countryside to London, and other things sort of took over. Started coming back to riding when my daughter was 5, so I took her for her first riding lesson, and she's not disabled. And suddenly I got the smell of horses back up my nose and just thought, I really need this back in my life. It's I think my midlife crisis. And then I was lucky enough to find Penniwells, though, that in itself was a whole other story and a journey. But it was finding my local RDA group and then signing up, and started riding with them 4 years ago, and that's where we are now.
Yeah, that's great. And so I know that you're a rider with Penniwells, but you're also a volunteer as well. So tell us a little bit about how you interact with the group as a volunteer and a rider.
So I've never been I'll probably take that back. I'd love to turn up and get on and ride and sit around and drink coffee. But I'm certainly not a rider that, is quite happy to turn up at the time of my lesson, get on, and then go home. And there was a practical element to that as well, because, stables are not on your doorstep. And so the effort involved in getting there was, to turn around and come straight back again. So that those two things combined just meant that I was very keen to be involved. Equally, my daughter, who's now a volunteer for RDA as well, wanted that experience, and that was as important to me as the riding. I missed all of that. It was something I used to do. I wanted to be able to muck out. I wanted to be able to clean tack. I wanted to tack up and groom and all the other elements. That's very much part of the experience for me.
Okay, and so for groups out there that maybe don't have participants as volunteers, how do you think you being a rider and a volunteer benefits Penniwells, your group?
So I think it's quite enriching and on both sides. So you meet, there's so much that can be given by riders and volunteers, and that exchange as well. So from the, you know, as being both, I mean, I think learning for volunteers, it's getting to know somebody, it's getting the opportunity to ask questions about how you do things with your particular disability, having that deeper understanding of the riders that they're supporting. It's again, and it's that mixing of people and actually seeing ability, seeing what somebody can do on the ground as well as in the saddle. And for me, it's meeting lots of different people from all sorts of backgrounds that you just wouldn't have contact with. And the main thing, that the thing that's the leveler is the horses and why you're there. And I think it's a two-way street. And we see happier volunteers because they feel more involved, they have more understanding, that whole perpetual thing happens where that you're, you know, and it's a bit of a cliche, but we're there as a team. It's not volunteers and riders and coaches, it's very much we are the team, it is Penniwells. And you know, that's our particular circumstance. And I know that not all, you know, we run 6 days a week, 9 to 5. And I say 6 days a week, it's 5 days a week, I'll get shot. But it's, you know, it's a busy group. We have, before COVID, sort of 150 riders, 100 volunteers. We're probably back to about 60% capacity, but, you know, we're a big group. And that's, you know, that's not necessarily people that are watching this now, is, you know, they don't have the same sort of amount of people through the gates. However, I think there's always an opportunity to do something that involves both the riders, their families, the volunteers, to kind of be able to offer this.
Yeah, so within the group. So within the group then, you're actually helping the group by, you can be a buddy to new riders when they first start. If you've got new volunteers starting, do you think this is something that participants can help out with to help the group with their time as well?
Definitely. I mean, it's just the buddying up scheme, you know, being able to do that either for riders or volunteers. You know, it's quite a scary, it's not a scary environment, we're not scary at all, but it's, you know, lots of people that know and work with each other very closely. And I think having a buddy to show you the ropes, involving riders at volunteer sessions for induction, doing that right at the beginning is just gives a whole different element, I think, to the experience. And it's something we do, it's something that we would definitely encourage. And as a rider, for me, it's again, being involved in that process just makes the whole thing a lot more seamless.
Yeah, and I think as well that we have a lot of groups that are just involved with schools and classes like that. But I think sometimes we do miss a trick with those groups, because with all of the schools, there's a huge support network of family and friends. And I think this is an area that we could actually utilise a lot more than we actually do at present, because there's a huge workforce out there that we could actually draw into the RDA family. What would you think about that?
I think there's always something you can do, and there's always opportunity, and it doesn't matter how big or small that group is. And you might be a group that runs out of a local stables and you do a session a week or 2 sessions a week, but there's nothing stopping you running a family day, be that a picnic in a park or a sensory day at the stables where it's not the riding, it's the grooming, bringing in siblings, bringing in family members, because there are people out there that want to help, and I you know, they just don't know how to, or haven't had the opportunity really to engage with the group where their child, their grandson, their granddaughter, or whomever rides, and it's not obvious, or you know, always how they can get involved. And I think it could just be a simple cup of coffee, picnic, or whatever, but actually engaging with those families, with those schools, is only got to be a benefit.
Yeah, just making the most of all the opportunities that are out there.
Yeah.
And so when you started with Penniwells, you'd got Penniwells, a group. Were you aware that there was life outside Penniwells within the RDA organisation?
I probably know more now than I ever did then. And I, you know, as a child, I'd had early connection with a group. But it was how that all tied together. And again, things had also changed quite a lot, you know, going from sort of the late 80s till fairly recently, you know, the organisation had changed. And I didn't appreciate that there was other groups that run differently. And I probably am still kind of, I'm in a position now where I am, that the group is quite big and quite involved. And I think I am still always surprised when not all groups run like that, and actually the circumstances are very different. Now, I applied to my local group and it worked for me and it worked well, whereas I think, you know, other groups may not have fitted what I needed from RDA. And it does come down to informed choice. And I know that the organisation is very keen that, you know, each individual RDA group has kind of quite a good profile. So when you're looking as a rider, you can make those informed choices about what you want, what you need, where you want this to take you. So yeah, I mean, it is difficult. I was, you know, I got a good fit, but that was chance.
Yeah, you think there might, somebody could benefit from having more information about what a different group does, so that it might be something that benefits them. Yeah, and so what about the benefit of having contact with other groups and other participants?
I think it's sharing knowledge, because it's, even within one disability sphere, there's going to be so many differences. So, you know, what works for, and I'll use my visual impairment as an example, what works for me as a visually impaired rider, my age, my experience, when my vision loss happened, how it affects me now, the fact that I can articulate that, whereas not everyone may be able to. So I think, you know, that knowledge within one group is great. And I think the advantages of being able to share experience is that, have you tried this? We've used this technique before. That, you know, sharing, and it's so valuable, you know, and every group will have a particular something to share. So I think that shared experience for participants, for the organisation, for volunteers, you know, you can't buy it in, you know, it's sharing it that will work. Yeah,
and so things like with the RDA All Stars Facebook group, there have been things where participants have posted on that about a particular disability that they've got and how they manage that. And so if they take that information back into their groups, that might be something that the groups, it could be quite valuable to them. So as you say, it's all shared knowledge and it's all shared experiences and everything like that, isn't it? Yeah. And, you know, particularly with the participants, so many groups have lost volunteers through COVID for many, many different reasons. And so if groups can make use of participants as volunteers as well, then all, you know, what was an uphill battle, they're already a little bit of the way along, because, you know, they've got the participants coming in and doing the volunteers' jobs as well, haven't they?
Yeah, and you know, it's, again, with volunteering, it's about, you know, you might have strengths and everybody will be able to offer something. So even if you feel that your volunteers, you know, may not be able to, your riders, sorry, will not be able to volunteer for you, there will always be something that they can do. You know, poo picking a field is something that, you know, I'm absolutely terrible at. I send the Labrador in, he's quite good, but you know, I can push the barrow and at least do the grunt work if it's with somebody that physically isn't able to do that but visually can. I also make a cracking cauliflower cheese and keep everybody fed. So, you know, there is always something that somebody can do. And it might be that, you know, grandma or auntie or uncle who's coming, you know, is a great cake baker or can make the tea, or, you know, just use them. They want to be useful. And it's finding out, you know, how they can do that and knowing that they can do that, because people think, well, I'm not horsey. And so volunteering, you know, an RDA isn't for me, but actually they're very good at creating things or making posters, or, as I said, making tea or cakes. You know, these, explore that with your locality, what people can offer. There will always be something somebody can do.
Yeah, or be very good on the computer and organisational skills and things like that. There's so many different things, aren't there? Caroline, what would you like to intersperse?
Yeah, sorry, there's a couple of things just came to me while you were talking there. I was I don't want to put Penniwells on the spot here and make an assumption that this is something that they do well, but I think communication to participants who, you know, so just assuming that you have sessions where you really are just having to have people come in, mount up, etc., have a lovely ride and go away, and in some RDA setups that there just isn't the scope around those sides. But there's no excuse, it seems to me, for not having good communication channels with your participants, so that the times that they're not in the saddle, they've still got that connection to what the group is doing. They've still perhaps got information about events that are coming up, or committee meetings they could be joining, or fundraising activities and that sort of thing. And I wonder whether that's something, an area as well that you've benefited from at Penniwells, or that you've seen done well elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, communication is key, and, you know, and it's getting that level of communication right. So, and I don't think there is one way of communicating that fits all, and I think that sometimes can be a mistake that's made. So it's, you know, it's looking at your demographic, but, you know, is it Facebook, is it emails, is it a notice board, which, you know, well, again, you know, anything that goes up on the notice board, I'm informed about verbally or by email. But I think it's finding, you know, what works, not just looking at one communication stream. And you have to constantly be on top of it. You know, we've, you know, our numbers of volunteers has dropped like everybody else's has. And you need to keep pushing that. There is always a volunteer drive to get people back in and those numbers back up, and I think everybody's struggling at the moment, but it's looking at all sorts of ways of promoting yourself, you know. And it might be you know, if you've got a school that rides with you, then perhaps having, you know, going to their summer fete and just having a stand there, or putting something in your local newspaper, and it's, you have to look at everything that goes into that. Sorry,
yeah, all different aspects.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then a different subject really, back to the point about the sort of the wider RDA network, and I just really point about the importance of trying to keep participants informed about opportunities that are going on in RDA outside of the group. Now, I'm not going to say, so what do you think about that? Because I'm assuming you think that's a good thing. But a sort of a trickier topic, I think, sometimes for RDA groups is informing. You want participants to be informed, but I know for some groups can feel a little bit defensive if they know they don't and can't do some of the activities and opportunities that their riders might want to do. And there's a tendency maybe then to sort of just keep to themselves because they don't really, it's difficult for them to, they know it's going to be difficult for them to meet their riders' needs. And I guess what our little team here tonight would feel is that, you know, if you are one of those groups who's feeling like, well, we can't offer lots more stuff, so what's the point of telling people it's there, or that's something that RDA does offer? And I would really, you know, my plea would be to those groups to just please keep that open door of communication and informing participants that those are opportunities are there, and being open to participants exploring opportunities at another group, or just making sure they can be having conversations with participants at other groups and being involved in those kinds of communication channels that we are facilitating. And if you're a group that doesn't compete, you could always arrange a trip to the national championships and not compete, but just make that a journey that people can go to and experience it, or your regionals, or a trip to a local group that's holding their qualifiers, or whatever it is, and just trying to think about opening that door a little bit, and not feeling, in ways I completely understand, but not feeling sort of defensive about what you as a group isn't able to offer. Sorry, there was no question there, just some thoughts. I don't know whether either of you have a sort of response or feeling about that.
I mean, mine is that there is a very fine line, and I think, you know, honesty as well. You know, you might have specific weight restrictions, you might have not enough ponies, no transport. But, you know, if you've got somebody who's very keen within your group to do something specific, is looking at how that perhaps you could facilitate that. And it might not be that it's something that you can do, or even if you've got anyone local to do it, but at least have that conversation rather than it being a closed door. Because, you know, sorry, my speech on my computer's just started talking to me. But you know, as a rider, I think, you know, that can be quite frustrating, and even, you know, if it's for a parent, you know, not understanding why. And I think if you can be honest with them and say, look, this is why we can't do it, then that's better than just shutting the door.
Yeah, and I think that is definitely a thing, and what we've been doing with making sure that we are going out to participants and getting their viewpoint. And it's really important, and we're not going to be able to please everybody the whole time. We went out and asked people about the changes to the dressage tests, and we got some really, really good feedback from that. And from that feedback, some of the parts of the dressage tests were actually altered. Now, we couldn't please everybody, but at least we'd been and we'd asked people and taken their views into account, and been back and said, well, on this occasion, this is why something couldn't happen. And it's taking people's views into account, so you've got more knowledge about what people want and what people are doing, and that's just so important. But one thing where you said just a little bit earlier about where all groups are struggling, and you're absolutely right with that. The group that I've always been involved with, which is Cleethorpes and Grimsby, one of the participants is actually the person that applies for all of their grants for the group that they get. And what groups will find more increasingly is, when you're trying to fundraise, if you can show fundraisers that you're involving your participants, that is just so powerful. And groups, firms, all people like that are wanting to know now that the participants' views are being taken into account. And I don't think that's something that groups always do appreciate, but it is something that is becoming far more important.
Yeah.
Yes, I would absolutely echo that, Emma. I think that's a really good point, in that, you know, we know we want to be consulting more and engaging participants more in RDA, because that's absolutely the right thing to be doing. But if you really need persuading, if it's not enough that it feels like the right thing to be doing, because it is also the fact that, yeah, just simply when it comes to the fundraising, you know, quite rightly, our fundraising team are telling us that donors all the time, they are asking for, you know, what is the engagement with participants? What is the consultation process with participants? Tell us about projects that you are co-creating with your participants. Where's the impact that your activities, whether you can show that your activities are having on your participants? So that side of things is becoming increasingly important. Absolutely. Okay, that's been extremely helpful. We've got just a couple of minutes left. I'm going to throw out a top tip for groups, or my sort of final plea, which is, if you can do one thing at all, just ask participants what they want. I think we all like to think that we all do this, and I'm sure we do. But if there's just one thing for me that I think that we can do, which we hear a lot from the participants that we're engaging now, is just, you know, just ask me, just tell me, just ask me what it is, and don't be frightened of what the answer might be. Asking somebody doesn't mean we have to do the thing that somebody wants, because there will be potentially reasons why we can't, but it's about having a conversation. We've got 3 minutes left, so you'd have 1.5 minutes each, Emma and Paula, for a top tip if you wanted to throw one into the mix.
Yep. No, I would just back up what you've said, that it's really important that just because you are asking somebody their viewpoint, it's not that we can always do what they want, but it's very important that we then go back to that person and then say to them, right, okay, we've been able to do this, or go back to them and say, well, on this occasion, we can't do that because of such and such. And so somebody knows that they've given their feedback, you've taken it into account, and you've gone back to them with a reason. So that's just backing up your tip, Caroline. Just ask people what they want. Paula?
Take time, look at your riders, their families, engage, sit and have a cup of tea when they come up, you know, just make it a more open experience, because there is just such a wealth of stories and experience that can so easily be missed, and get out there as much as you can into the community, be it, you know, a local supermarket or a fete or whatever. Get the word out, because there's, even now, you know, I had somebody local today who came with someone else, and she said, God, I've been coming up and down here for years, and even know you were here, you know. And it just goes to show that, you know, there is always somebody that you've missed.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I think what I'm going to take away is a point I think you made, Paula, earlier, about just how enriching it is for everybody involved in the group when everybody in the group is involved together. And that's an image that I will be holding dear and keeping with me as Emma and I continue on this pathway. So we are absolutely at time. You've both done extremely well keeping to your time. So that just remains for me to say thank you very much to Emma Wells and to Paula Thomas for joining me this evening, and to you all for coming along. Thank you very much, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you. Bye.